This is Heliox, where evidence meets empathy. Independent, moderated, timely, deep, gentle, clinical, global, and community conversations about things that matter. Breathe easy. We go deep and lightly surface the big ideas.
So imagine you're sitting at your kitchen table tonight.
Okay.
Across from you is your young adult child. And between the two of you sits this massive stack of college brochures, trade school applications, university prospectuses.
Right, the classic daunting pile of paperwork.
Exactly. But sitting right next to those brochures is your phone. It's face up, and it's displaying an article you just read.
Let me guess. It's about some new AI system doing something impossible.
Spot on. It's an article about an artificial intelligence that just, passed the bar exam, aced the medical boards, and wrote a completely functioning piece of software in like 3 seconds.
And for free.
Right, for free. So you're looking at a pen, and you're about to co-sign a $100,000 student loan.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And you were feeling this very specific, very heavy kind of anxiety.
Yeah.
You're absolutely terrified of buying a ticket for a train that is already derailed.
That is, well, it's the defining anxiety of this economic moment, frankly.
Yeah. How on earth do you choose a career path or advise your child on a degree when the underlying rules of the whole global economy are basically being rewritten by AI every few months?
And it is entirely justified to feel that way because historically, education and career planning relied on a static map, right?
You do X and you get Y.
Exactly. You invest this much time and this much money into a specific degree, and it yields a very predictable career trajectory. But that map is, it's currently on fire.
It's completely burning. And that burning map is the exact reason we are doing this deep dive today.
Yes, it is.
We're not going to sit here and guess about the future. We're not doing the broad tech utopian platitudes.
No flying cars or doomsday terminators today.
None of that. Instead, we are looking at the actual blueprints.
The literal official strategy documents from world governments.
Right. We've gathered this massive stack of official government blueprints, white papers, and economic strategies from 2025 and 2026.
It's a lot of reading.
It is. But we're looking at how the world's biggest economic powers, Canada, the European Union, China, and the U.S., are actively, right at this moment, restructuring their workforces.
And their education systems, too, to deal with this AI age.
Yeah, so our mission today is to decode these documents for you. We want to extract the practical, actionable knowledge so you can actually navigate that kitchen table conversation with some confidence.
What is truly fascinating when you lay all these international documents side by side is that the underlying technology is universal.
What do you mean?
Well, a large language model, or an LLM, it operates the exact same way in Toronto as it does in Berlin or Beijing.
Oh, right. Math is math.
Exactly. It's a mathematical system predicting the next word or the next pixel based on massive amounts of training data. But the reaction to that technology...
That's where things get wild.
Deeply local. Each region's blueprint is just profoundly shaped by its own societal values, its political structures, and its specific demographic crises.
And understanding those different global bets isn't just like a fun exercise in geopolitics.
No, not at all.
It's a strategic advantage for you and your child. Because if we can understand how the biggest economies are placing their bets, we can find the common denominators.
We can figure out what human skills are actually going to hold value over the next decade.
Right. So I want to start our analysis close to home with the Canadian perspective.
That is, honestly, the perfect baseline.
Yeah. Why do you say that?
Well, because when I was reading through the Canadian materials, specifically the reports from the Future Skills Center and the Conference Board of Canada, they don't focus heavily on abstract philosophical frameworks.
Yeah, they really don't.
They focus on the empirical day-to-day reality of specific jobs. They're looking at the actual tasks people do from 9 to 5.
Right. They took a very granular, market-driven approach. They looked at millions of real job postings and worker surveys.
Yes. And the September 2025 report, Canada's Workforce in Transition, it opens with this headline number that is just impossible to ignore.
Which is?
57.4% of Canadian jobs are highly exposed to AI.
57.4. I mean, we're talking about well over half the workforce.
Yeah.
That's more than 10 million individual workers whose daily jobs are directly in the crosshairs of this tech.
But here's where we really have to pause and define our terms. because that word exposed is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence.
How so?
Well, in previous decades, when we talked about automation, say, the introduction of robotic arms on automotive assembly lines being exposed usually meant being replaced.
Right, a physical robot takes over a physical task. The human goes home.
Exactly. But AI is fundamentally different because it's automating cognitive tasks.
Right.
It's automating thought processes, data synthesis, pattern recognition, things we thought only brains could do.
So the Canadian researchers actually split that massive 57.4% into two subcategories. I'm looking at the breakdown here. They divide it into AI competing jobs and AI augmenting jobs.
Yes, that distinction is crucial.
Help me understand the mechanical difference between those two, because it feels like the whole game hinges on this.
It absolutely does. Let's start with the AI competing category. According to the data, this makes up 49% of those highly exposed jobs.
Okay.
An AI competing role is one where the core fundamental tasks of the job relied heavily on routine cognitive processing.
Like tasks that a machine can do with very little human judgment.
Precisely. Think of a graphic designer creating standard corporate logos, or an administrative assistant scheduling meetings and summarizing emails.
Or like a basic bookkeeper categorizing expenses.
Exactly. The heavy lifting of those jobs is routine data manipulation. So the AI can essentially consume the core task.
Okay, so that sounds an awful lot like the traditional definition of being replaced.
It does, yes.
But then you have the other 51%, the AI augmenting roles. What separates them?
Well, in an AI augmenting role, the AI still handles the routine data processing, but the core value of the job relies on what happens after the data is processed.
Oh, okay.
The human worker uses the AI's output to exercise high-level judgment, or maybe a physical world intervention, or some complex interpersonal interaction.
So like an environmental scientist or a trial lawyer?
Yes, or a senior project manager. The AI is a powerful tool that enhances their productivity, but it cannot perform the final critical function of the job.
The report gives a very specific example that really clarified this for me. They compare two different roles in the medical field.
The medical lab technologist and the physician.
Right. Both are highly exposed to AI, but in completely opposite ways.
Let's walk through the mechanics of that, because it's really the perfect microcosm of the entire global economy right now.
Okay, so let's look at the medical lab tech. Historically, what does their day look like?
Yeah.
A blood sample comes in, they prep it, put a slide under a microscope, manually scan it, count the cells.
Right, looking for specific visual abnormalities.
Exactly. And then they sit down at the keyboard and type up a standardized report for the doctor. I mean, that is a highly skilled job.
It is, but it is ultimately a routine cognitive and visual task.
Yeah.
And today, an AI system powered by advanced computer vision can process that digitized slide in a fraction of a second. Yeah, it's been trained on hundreds of millions of slides, so it can actually flag abnormalities with a higher statistical accuracy than the human eye.
And then, I assume, an integrated language model just automatically drafts that standardized diagnostic report.
You got it. The entire core workflow of the lab tech is enveloped by the AI. That is why it's an AI competing role.
Okay, so now contrast that with the physician who ordered the blood test. This is the AI augmenting role.
Right.
The physician receives that AI-generated lab report. They might also pull up an AI diagnostic tool that instantly cross-references the patient's symptoms with millions of medical journals.
Incredible, superhuman data crunching.
Yeah, but the AI does not sit in the room with the patient.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't look the patient in the eye. It doesn't factor in their complex family history or their stress levels or their lifestyle.
And it certainly can't physically examine the patient to feel a swollen lymph node.
Right. And most importantly, the AI cannot provide the empathy required to convince a scared patient to actually adhere to a difficult treatment plan.
Precisely. The physician takes the raw processing power of the AI and applies human judgment and empathy to it. The AI acts as a co-pilot, but the physician remains firmly in the captain's chair.
So an analogy comes to mind. Let me see if this tracks for you.
Sure.
It's like the invention of the automobile. If your child is going to school to learn how to be the engine-like, their goal is to graduate and just be the thing that processes raw data all day.
Then they are in massive trouble.
Right, because we just invented a much cheaper, faster digital engine. But if they're learning to be the driver, the person who steers the engine, decides the destination, navigates the terrain, then they're not just safe, they're going to travel faster than ever before.
I think the engine and driver metaphor is a really great starting point, but the Canadian data actually throws a fascinating twist into that logic.
What kind of twist?
Well, it is not as simple as saying drivers survive and engines go extinct. What the Future Skills Center found is that the engine jobs aren't just vanishing overnight.
They aren't.
No, they are mutating.
Mutating how? Because I'm looking at the data from the report, and it shows that between 2023 and 2024, employment in AI augmenting roles grew by 2.9%, which makes sense. We need more drivers.
Right.
But the AI competing roles, the engines, they still grew by 1.6%. It wasn't some massive drop-off.
True. That 1.6% essentially matches the baseline growth of the entire labor market. But you have to look deeper into the specific job postings.
Okay, let's look deeper.
For certain pure routine roles, the floor is absolutely falling out. Between 2022 and 2024, job postings for desktop publishers dropped by 12.4%.
Wow.
Sales-related data entry roles dropped by almost 12%. Traditional editor positions dropped by almost 9%.
So companies are actively deciding they just don't need to hire humans to do pure text and data manipulation anymore.
But here's the critical twist. While the total number of those job postings is dropping, the postings that do exist are suddenly demanding entirely new skills.
What do you mean?
The researchers found that since 2018, job postings asking for explicit AI skills have nearly tripled across the Canadian economy. And in those vulnerable, highly exposed industries, the demand for AI skills is surging even faster.
Wait. Let me make sure I understand the logic there.
Yeah.
If an AI can do the job of a desktop publisher, why is a company hiring a desktop publisher with AI skills? Why not just buy the AI software and fire the publisher entirely?
That's the logical question. The answer is that the software, as advanced as it is, still hallucinates.
Right. It makes things up.
Exactly. It still makes mistakes. It lacks an understanding of a company's specific brand voice or cultural nuance. It lacks, for lack of a better term, taste.
Human taste.
Yes. So companies aren't eliminating the role entirely. They're transforming it. They still want an editor, but they no longer want an editor who manually reads one article an hour.
They want an editor who knows how to build a custom AI workflow to pre-edit 50 articles an hour.
Bingo. And then uses their human taste to review and finalize the output.
So they're essentially demanding that the engine learn how to drive itself.
That's a great way to put it. They are forcing the workers in AI competing roles to upgrade their skills to stay relevant. The worker who refuses to use the AI tool is the one who gets replaced.
Not necessarily by the AI itself, but by another worker who knows how to use the AI.
Exactly right.
So let's bring this back to the parent and the young adult sitting at the kitchen table.
Okay.
The Conference Board of Canada surveyed 1,000 corporate decision makers about what skills they actually want to see in new hires. What's the practical takeaway for a student planning their education?
The survey reveals a pretty stark polarization in required skills depending on the path you take.
Okay, break that down for me.
If your child is aiming for an AI augmenting role like management, healthcare, complex science, the demand is heavily shifting towards social and emotional skills.
Makes sense.
The decision makers explicitly cited leadership, change management, and emotional intelligence as the top requirements.
Right, because if the AI is crunching all the spreadsheets, the human manager needs to be focused on leading the human team, navigating office politics, managing the stress of all this change.
Exactly. Now, if your child is entering an AI competing field, say entry-level coding, digital marketing, administration, the requested skills are entirely different.
What are they asking for there?
Employers in those sectors are demanding adaptability and analytical skills above all else.
They're basically saying, we know this job is going to change 3 times in the next 5 years.
Pretty much.
We don't care if you memorize the current software. We need you to be adaptable enough to learn the new AI tools we're going to buy next year and analytical enough to spot the errors when the AI inevitably messes up.
That is the reality. And hovering over all of this is the new foundational baseline. The report notes that 70% of all organizational decision makers now agree that basic AI literacy is a mandatory requirement for today's workplace, regardless of the role.
So to summarize the Canadian blueprint, we're basically looking at a free market approach.
Very much so.
The government is monitoring the data. They're offering targeted grants through the Future Skills Center to help workers transition, but they're largely letting the market dictate the terms.
If you adapt and gain AI literacy, you survive. If you refuse, you get left behind. It is a very pragmatic, observation-based strategy.
But, that free market approach, leaves a massive vulnerability, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
What happens to the people who can't adapt fast enough? Does a society just accept that millions of people might be economically discarded because they, couldn't figure out how to write a good prompt for a language model?
And that fear of social collateral damage is exactly what the European Union is trying to legislate out of existence.
Okay, the contrast between Canada and the EU is just staggering here.
It really is. If Canada is observing the changing weather and handing out umbrellas to the people who ask for them,
The European Union is attempting to build a continent-wide, legally mandated climate control system.
I love that analogy, yes.
So let's cross the Atlantic and dive into the EU blueprint. The foundational documents here are the EU AI Act, which fully entered into application in 2025 and 2026 alongside their Apply AI strategy.
Right.
We hear a lot about the EU AI Act in the news, but usually just in vague terms about, like, regulation. What is their actual underlying philosophy here?
The core philosophy of the EU is precautionary, rights-based, and human-centric.
Precautionary.
Yeah. They do not view artificial intelligence merely as an economic engine or a productivity tool. They view it as a profound, systemic, societal risk that requires strict boundaries.
Okay.
They are attempting to establish a global benchmark for AI regulation, very much in the same way they did with data privacy.
Oh, you mean the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation?
Precisely.
And for anyone who doesn't remember, that was the massive EU law implemented back in 2018 that essentially forced the entire global internet to change how it tracks user data because no multinational tech company could afford to lose the European market.
Exactly. The EU AI Act is designed to be the GDPR for algorithms. And because it's a regulation with a capital R, it applies uniformly across all 27 member states. It's not a patchwork of guidelines. It is hard law.
So how does the law actually work? I mean, do they just ban AI altogether?
No. They use a tiered, risk-based approach. They categorize AI systems based on the level of threat they pose to fundamental human rights.
Okay, so what's at the top of that tier?
At the very top, you have unacceptable risk. These are AI practices that are outright prohibited by law.
What falls into that category? What's unacceptable?
Things like state-run social scoring systems.
Oh, like where an AI monitors your behavior and decides if you can access public services.
Right, or the use of real-time biometric identification, like live facial recognition, by law enforcement in public spaces, with very narrow exceptions.
So the EU is drawing a hard line in the sand and saying, we don't care how efficient this makes the police, it violates fundamental human dignity, so it's illegal. Okay, that makes sense for the dystopian stuff. But what about the AI being used in regular businesses, like HR or something?
That falls largely into the high-risk category. This includes AI systems used in critical infrastructure, education, law enforcement, and crucially for our discussion, employment, and human resources.
Okay.
If a company wants to use an AI system to scan resumes or evaluate employee performance or make hiring decisions, they face incredibly heavy regulatory burdens.
Like what is the actual mechanic of that burden? Do they just fill out a form?
Oh, it's way more than a form. Before a high-risk system can be deployed, the provider must undergo a fundamental rights impact assessment.
Wait, what does that actually look like in practice?
Think of it like an environmental impact study, but instead of proving you won't pollute a river, you have to prove your algorithm won't pollute human rights.
Wow.
Yeah. The company has to rigorously test their AI to prove that it doesn't contain hidden biases. For example, if an AI hiring tool was trained on historical data from a male-dominated engineering firm, it might naturally start penalizing female applicants.
Because it learned that male equates to successful hire.
Exactly. The EU law forces the company to mathematically prove they've mitigated that bias, establish clear human oversight mechanisms, and maintain massive documentation to prove their compliance to government regulators.
That is a massive undertaking for any company.
It is.
But for the parent and child sitting at the kitchen table, the most directly impactful part of this entire legislative package is Article 4 of the AI Act. This blew my mind when I read it.
Article 4 is fascinating.
It went into effect in February 2025. And it literally mandates AI literacy by law.
It is a remarkable, almost unprecedented piece of legislation. Article 4 requires that all providers and deployers of AI systems take measures to ensure a sufficient level of AI literacy among their staff.
I really have to push back on this concept, though.
Go ahead.
Can you actually legislate literacy? I mean, it sounds like a parliament passing a law demanding that everyone appreciate classical music.
Yeah.
How do you even enforce that?
It's
Does a government inspector show up at a mid-sized German auto parts manufacturer and start quizzing the assembly line workers on their prompt engineering skills?
I mean, it is a logistical nightmare, and that is exactly the tension at the heart of the European strategy.
So how do they enforce it?
The enforcement mechanism relies on national competent authorities, essentially labor and tech inspectors, who can audit companies. They look for formal training programs, documented competency frameworks, and continuing education logs.
There's a lot of auditing.
Yes, if a company deploys a high-risk AI system and their staff isn't properly trained to oversee it, the company can face massive fines.
But doesn't this just bog down European companies in endless compliance training and paperwork?
That is the most common critique, yes.
Because while an American startup or a Chinese tech giant is out there iterating on new models at breakneck speed, the European company is stuck in a seminar learning how to fill out a fundamental rights impact assessment. Won't this just kill European innovation?
Well, European policymakers are making a very specific, highly calculated counterbet here. They're betting on the concept of trustworthy AI.
Explain that. What is the bet?
The EU believes that as AI becomes more powerful, more embedded in critical infrastructure, and potentially more dangerous, global consumers and businesses are going to experience a massive backlash against unregulated black box algorithms.
Interesting.
The EU is betting that trustworthy AI systems that are guaranteed by law to be transparent, unbiased, and safe will become a premium global product. They're essentially treating AI the way we treat the pharmaceutical industry.
Oh, that's a brilliant way to look at it.
I
Because
know.
you can't just mix chemicals in your garage, call it medicine, and sell it to the public.
Exactly. It has to go through rigorous, documented clinical trials to prove it's safe. The EU is demanding clinical trials for algorithms.
Well,
And to support this massive regulatory shift, they are building sweeping educational infrastructure. They aren't just passing the law and walking away.
right. I saw they launched the AI Skills Academy.
Yes, and the Union of Skills. They are integrating mandatory AI literacy into primary and secondary education through their digital competence framework.
I was reading about their Apply AI strategy, and they are taking a very targeted, sector-specific approach. They're pouring funding into specific strategic areas like healthcare, smart mobility, cultural media.
They even have something called the AI Entrepreneurs Lab.
What's that?
It pairs high-potential university graduates with experienced industry mentors to help them navigate this complex regulatory environment while building startups. They are attempting to engineer a highly regulated, highly ethical, and highly literate workforce from the ground up.
Okay, so let's translate this back to the kitchen table.
Right.
If a young adult is looking at this European blueprint, what is their career strategy?
Well, if your child wants to live and work in Europe, or if they want to work for any major multinational corporation that does business in Europe, which is almost all of them, having a hybrid skill set is going to be incredibly lucrative.
What does that hybrid look like?
Yes, they need their domain expertise in finance or engineering or law. Yes, they need AI fluency. But if they add a deep technical understanding of AI ethics, compliance, and how to conduct fundamental rights impact assessments,
They'll be indispensable.
indispensable.
Because every company on Earth trying to sell software in Paris or Berlin needs someone who can navigate Article 4.
Precisely. The EU is effectively legislating entirely new compliance and ethics industries into existence.
Okay, so we have Canada relying on market forces and targeted grants. We have the European Union trying to proactively regulate the technology to protect human rights.
Right.
But what happens when you have a country that doesn't just want to regulate AI, but desperately needs AI to survive a looming demographic catastrophe?
Oh, this is where it gets intense.
What happens when a government has the centralized power to completely re-engineer its workforce from the top down almost overnight?
That takes us to the Chinese blueprint.
Yeah.
And the scale of what China is attempting right now is unlike anything else happening on the planet.
Let's set the historical context here, because you really cannot understand China's AI strategy without understanding their population data.
No, you can't.
According to the demographic analysis we reviewed, China's working age population shrank by 6.8 million people in the year 2022 alone.
And that was just 1 year. If you look at the broader trend since 2013, their total workforce has fallen by over 77 million people.
Just to put that number into perspective for you, that is the equivalent of the entire population of Germany simply vanishing from the labor market in a decade.
It's staggering. It is a demographic cliff driven by the long-term effects of the historical one-child policy and rapidly changing modern social dynamics.
And not only are there fewer workers, but the workers who remain are getting older.
Right, the average age of a Chinese worker is now approaching 40 compared to roughly 32 just 4 decades ago.
So they have a rapidly shrinking, rapidly aging workforce. Yet at the exact same time, the state is trying to transition its entire economy away from cheap manufacturing and into high-tech sectors.
Like advanced digital services, green energy, aerospace.
Exactly. So they have a massive math problem. They need hyperproductive workers to offset the loss in sheer numbers.
And their solution is the Vocational Skills Upgrade 2025-2027 initiative.
Tell me about that.
It is a breathtaking, state-directed mobilization campaign. The government is aiming to formally retrain 30 million workers over a 3-year period.
30 million.
In 2026 alone, the Ministry of Human Resources and Social Security announced they are directly subsidizing the training of over 10 million individuals.
10 million people retrained in a single year. How do you even execute that logistically? Are they setting up massive state-run boot camps?
Well, it's a combination of heavy state subsidies flowing directly to technical colleges, massive corporate tax incentives for internal retraining programs, and the deployment of advanced ed tech at an industrial scale.
Like VR and AI-driven personalized learning.
Exactly, and they are targeting very specific strategical sectors. The blueprints repeatedly highlight the low-altitude economy.
Okay, let's explain what that is, because when I first read that, it sounded like science fiction.
It does sound like sci-fi. The low-altitude economy refers to the commercial use of airspace below roughly 3,000 meters.
Right.
We are talking about massive integrated drone delivery networks for everything from medical supplies to consumer packages, plus electric flying taxi services.
McKinsey estimates this could be a $90 billion global market by 2030.
Yeah.
And China intends to absolutely dominate it.
Yes, they are mass training drone operators, fleet managers, maintenance technicians.
They're also heavily focused on advanced manufacturing, new energy vehicles, and, interestingly, elderly care, which obviously ties back to that aging population.
Right.
But there's massive tension here. If the state is pushing so hard for AI adoption to increase productivity, wouldn't Chinese companies just fire their human workers and replace them with algorithms to hit those efficiency targets?
That is the exact tension that led to a series of incredibly important legal rulings in China. We reviewed reports from Kexin, a major Chinese financial magazine, alongside some fascinating discussions on Reddit tracking these local labor disputes.
Yes, I want to dive into the specific case of Mr. Liu because it perfectly illustrates this dynamic.
Oh, the data collector case.
Yeah.
Yes. So Mr. Liu was a data collector for a media company. His job was to scour the internet for trending topics, compile data, and organize it for the editorial team.
A classic AI competing role. A textbook routine cognitive task.
Exactly. So the company purchases a new AI web scraping and summarization tool that can do Mr. Liu's job in a fraction of the time. The company fires Mr. Liu,
Naturally.
but they don't want to pay him a standard severance package. So they attempt to use a specific clause in Chinese employment law regarding material changes in objective circumstances.
Right. They argued to the court that the invention and adoption of this AI tool was essentially an unforeseeable force measure like an act of God, like an earthquake or a flood.
Right. They claimed it fundamentally destroyed the basis of the employment contract.
It was a very bold legal strategy to try and bypass severance payouts during an era of rapid automation.
But the courts aggressively rejected that argument.
They absolutely did.
The court ruled that a company proactively choosing to adopt an AI system to save money is an autonomous business decision. It is an act of management, not an act of God.
Therefore, you cannot simply terminate the worker under that clause.
The court ruled that the company must prioritize retraining the worker, reassigning them to a comparable role, or if termination is truly the only option, they must pay fair, standard compensation for wrongful termination.
And this ruling reveals the dual mandate of the Chinese government. On one hand, the state is demanding aggressive, breakneck AI dominance to compete globally.
To offset their shrinking workforce.
Right. But on the other hand, the ruling party is fiercely protective of social stability. Mass unemployment caused by abrupt AI automation is viewed as a severe threat to that stability.
So they are effectively forcing a marriage between the worker and the algorithm.
Exactly. Chinese labor scholars and policymakers are heavily promoting a philosophy that treats AI as an empowerment tool rather than a replacement tool.
I read they use a very specific formula to describe this, 1 plus 12.
Yes. The human plus the machine equals more than the sum of its parts. They want the AI to handle the repetitive, strenuous work, and they want the human worker to elevate into a role focused on creative problem solving and quality control.
And major Chinese tech and manufacturing firms are already creating hybridized roles, right?
Yeah.
You see a frontline assembly worker being retrained and rebranded as a robotics engineering assistant.
And the state is backing this transition with formal bureaucratic structures. They recently rolled out a new 8-grade vocational skill grading system.
How does that work?
This system formally links a worker's certified skill level, specifically their mastery of new digital and AI tools, directly to their wages and promotion tracks.
Oh, wow. So they are embedding financial incentives directly into the upskilling process.
Furthermore, they are continually updating their National Registry of Official Occupations to reflect this new reality. They've officially recognized entirely new professions.
Like AI training specialist or generative AI system tester.
Or generative AI animation producer.
So when a parent looks at this massive centralized Chinese experiment, what is the core lesson they can extract for their own child's future?
The primary lesson from the Chinese blueprint is the immense strategic value of learning to direct and train AI systems.
Not just use them, but train them.
Yes. If your child learns how to be the person who trains the specialized AI agents within their chosen industry, the person who acts as the bridge between human intent and machine execution, they become indispensable.
Because China is betting its entire industrial future on the premise that a highly trained human collaborating seamlessly with an AI will vastly outperform either a human working alone or an AI operating autonomously.
It is a massive, highly coordinated gamble.
It really is.
Yeah.
But what if we look at an approach that is almost the exact opposite?
The complete opposite side of the spectrum.
An approach that rejects state-directed retraining, rejects sweeping preventative regulation like the EU, and instead relies entirely on aggressive deregulation, private enterprise, and the rapid construction of massive physical infrastructure.
That brings us to the United States blueprint.
Now, before we dive into the U.S. strategy, we need to pause and make a very explicit disclaimer here.
Yes, this is crucial.
We're analyzing these documents strictly through the lens of their policy impact on the workforce and the economy. We are maintaining absolute political neutrality.
We're just imparting the facts.
Right. We're discussing the shift from the previous administration to the current one, because that shift represents a dramatic alteration in the rules of the game for the American worker.
That context is vital. The previous Biden administration's approach to AI was characterized heavily by Executive Order 14110.
And what did that focus on?
It focused significantly on establishing safety guidelines, ethical guardrails, and developing regulatory frameworks to manage the risks of AI.
But the Trump administration fundamentally altered that trajectory. They rescinded that previous executive order and replaced it with the 2025-2026 America's AI Action Plan.
And the philosophy behind this new plan is a stark departure from both the previous U.S. administration and the current European Union approach.
Right. The new U.S. philosophy is explicit. The way to win the global AI race is through speed, unhindered innovation, and absolute reliance on the private sector.
The action plan explicitly argues that restricting AI development with what they term onerous regulation would paralyze one of the most promising technological advancements in human history.
The core strategy is to establish American AI as the undisputed gold standard worldwide, not by regulating it, but by building a massive physical ecosystem faster than any other nation on Earth.
The unofficial rallying cry of this blueprint is, "Build, baby, build."
And we really need to emphasize the word physical here, because when we talk about artificial intelligence, we use these ethereal, abstract terms like the cloud or neural networks.
Right, but the cloud is not in the sky.
No, the cloud lives in massive, sprawling concrete and steel data centers.
And those data centers require an astonishing amount of electricity. An AI data center isn't just a warehouse full of hard drives, it is a massive heat-generating engine.
Training a single advanced large language model can consume as much electricity as a small city.
Exactly, and that is why the U.S. blueprint focuses so heavily on infrastructure permitting. The government is aggressively streamlining environmental reviews. They are targeting reforms to NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act.
Let's explain NEPA for a second. This is a foundational environmental law from the 1970s that requires federal agencies to assess the environmental impact of major infrastructure projects.
Historically, a complex NEPA review for a new power plant could take 5, 7, sometimes 10 years of litigation and paperwork before a single shovel hit the dirt.
The new U.S. blueprint utilizes mechanisms like the Fast T41 process to drastically accelerate those timelines.
The goal is to rapidly clear the way for the construction of advanced semiconductor manufacturing facilities, gigawatt-scale data centers, and the new energy grids required to power them.
And because AI requires continuous massive baseload power, the blueprint specifically highlights the accelerated development of advanced nuclear fission, experimental nuclear fusion, and enhanced geothermal energy plants.
So let's bring this monumental infrastructure push right back to the kitchen table.
Okay, you have a teenager who is trying to decide between pursuing a traditional 4-year computer science degree or attending a trade school. When you read this U.S. blueprint, you realize something highly counterintuitive.
The safest, most in-demand, and potentially highest-paying job in the AI revolution might not be the software engineer sitting in an office coding the next iteration of a language model.
Mind-blowing. It might be the advanced HVAC technician who understands the complex liquid cooling systems required to keep the servers from melting down.
Or the master electrician wiring the new nuclear plant, or the heavy equipment operator excavating the site for the data center.
That is an explicit major pillar of the U.S. plan. They call it Empowering American Workers. The administration issued an executive order specifically titled Preparing Americans for High-Paying Skilled Trade Jobs of the Future.
They are directing the Department of Labor to massively expand registered apprenticeships and career and technical education programs specifically for the physical occupations critical to building and maintaining AI infrastructure.
They want to train the builders of the physical AI era.
But they are also addressing the broader general workforce through a highly decentralized, accessible approach. The Department of Labor launched an initiative called Make America AI Ready.
And the delivery mechanism for this training is brilliantly simple. This was honestly the most surprising detail in the entire stack of documents for me.
Right. You don't need a laptop. You don't need high-speed internet. You don't need to log into some complex government portal.
You literally just text the word ready to the number 2022.
It is designed for maximum frictionless adoption. When you text that number, you're enrolled in a free, 7-day, bite-sized AI literacy course delivered entirely over SMS text messages.
Taking what, about 10 minutes a day?
Yep.
But what can you actually learn about AI via text message?
It covers the fundamental practical basics. It explains how generative AI works, provides practical use cases for everyday jobs, teaches the basics of writing an effective prompt.
And crucially, it teaches users how to critically evaluate the AI's output for errors or hallucinations.
Right. It is the absolute ground floor baseline of AI literacy, delivered directly to the device that almost every American already has in their pocket.
And simultaneously, the National Science Foundation is rolling out a much larger program called Tech Access, AI Ready America.
This program establishes state coordination hubs across every state and territory. But importantly, the federal government isn't acting as the teacher.
These hubs are designed to act as connectors, right?
Yes. They link local small businesses, community colleges, and regional workforce boards with existing AI resources developed by the private sector.
The goal is to help a local plumbing company or a regional logistics firm figure out how to deploy AI to increase their competitiveness using training from local institutions.
It is a fundamentally decentralized approach. The federal government provides the initial funding incentives, they remove the regulatory roadblocks, and they step back, relying on private enterprise and individual ambition to actually execute the transition.
The U.S. plan also makes a very strong push for open source and open weight AI models.
Let's define that really quick. Open source means the underlying code and the mathematical weights of the AI model are made freely available to the public.
Rather than being locked behind a corporate paywall like a proprietary system.
Right. The U.S. strategy believes that making powerful models freely accessible allows thousands of academic researchers, small startups, and independent developers to innovate rapidly.
They aren't beholden to a handful of massive tech monopolies.
Exactly. They are also investing heavily in AI-enabled science, using specialized AI to discover new advanced materials, design novel pharmaceuticals, and unlock complex biological systems.
So for a young adult mapping out their future, the U.S. blueprint signals massive long-term opportunities at the intersection of AI and the physical world.
It is not just about building chatbots to write emails. It's about applying AI to advanced manufacturing, defense technologies, aerospace, and the hard sciences.
Okay, let's take a collective breath here. We have just taken a whirlwind tour through 4 radically different global strategies.
It really is dizzying when you look at them all together.
Right. We have Canada observing the market and trying to adapt the existing workforce through targeted grants.
We have the European Union utilizing sweeping continent-wide legislation to mandate ethical literacy and protect human rights.
We have China orchestrating a massive state-funded vocational overhaul to counteract a severe demographic collapse.
And we have the United States aggressively deregulating and leaning on the private sector to spur an unprecedented infrastructure boom.
It is a complex, often contradictory global landscape.
It is.
So let's bring it all back to that kitchen table.
Right.
You were sitting there with your child staring at these diverse global strategies. How do you synthesize all of this noise into a single, cohesive, actionable philosophy for a young person's future?
This is the most important part of our analysis today. Because when you lay all four of these blueprints side by side and you strip away the massive political, cultural, and geographic differences,
An incredible unified consensus emerges. Every major economic power on Earth fundamentally agrees on a few core truths about the future of work.
they absolutely do.
Okay, let's establish those truths. What is the first common denominator?
First, pure manual routine and pure cognitive routine tasks are dead. The engine roles are being automated.
If a job or a specific task within a job can be written down as a predictable, repeatable series of if-then steps.
An AI or an AI-driven robot will eventually do it cheaper, faster, and with fewer errors. You cannot build a lifelong career solely on routine processing anymore.
The era of being rewarded simply for acting like a biological hard drive is over. Okay, what is the second truth?
Second, AI literacy is the new non-negotiable global baseline. It doesn't matter how you acquire it.
It doesn't matter if it's demanded by market forces in Canada, mandated by federal law in the EU, subsidized by the state in China, or texted to your phone in the United States.
You must understand how to interact with, direct, and critically evaluate artificial intelligence. It has become as fundamental to professional survival as reading, writing, and basic mathematics.
But wait, if everyone have basic AI literacy, how does anyone stand out? What is the actual differentiator for a student applying for a job in 5 years?
That brings us to the third and most crucial point of consensus. It is the concept of AI plus X.
AI plus X. Let's unpack the mechanics of that.
A young person today should not necessarily feel pressured to just study AI in a vacuum, unless, of course, their passion is to become a foundational machine learning researcher building the underlying models.
Right. But for the vast majority of the workforce.
What the global economy desperately wants is deep domain expertise combined with AI fluency.
So you find your X.
Exactly. You study a field you are genuinely passionate about. That could be sustainable agriculture, pediatric medicine, constitutional law, advanced HVAC systems, plumbing, graphic design. That is your X.
You spend your time mastering the nuances, the history, and the physical realities of that domain.
And then you become the absolute expert in applying AI tools to that specific field.
You become the AI-augmented physician from the Canadian report. You become the AI-augmented electrician building the U.S. data center. You become the AI-augmented farmer using drone networks in China.
Yes. The human brings the deep domain knowledge, the physical world capability, the ethical judgment, and the empathy. The AI brings the superhuman processing power and data synthesis.
That is the 1+12 synergy that the Chinese economists are writing about. That is why the AI augmenting roles in Canada are showing the strongest growth.
It is the ultimate winning combination.
I love that framework. But I want to throw a major conceptual wrench into the works here.
Okay, throw it.
Because everything we've discussed so far, the LLMs writing reports, the web scrapers, the chatbots, assumes that AI continues roughly on its current trajectory.
Right. It assumes AI remains primarily a digital tool for language, data, and image generation.
But when you read the fine print in the US and Chinese documents, they are dedicating massive resources to future architectures. What happens if the underlying architecture of AI fundamentally changes while this young adult is halfway through their degree?
It is the most vital question you can ask, and it is the exact reason why rigid 5-year career plans are so dangerous right now.
Right. What if we move past chatbots? What if the next major breakthrough is embodied intelligence?
Let's define that, because it's a critical concept. Embodied intelligence refers to AI systems that are given physical, robotic bodies capable of navigating and interacting with the unpredictable physical world.
We are talking about humanoid robots that understand physics, spatial reasoning, and complex motor control.
Yes.
So instead of an AI just generating a blueprint for a house, an embodied AI actually frames the walls, runs the electrical wire, and installs the plumbing.
Or what if the AI architecture shifts towards systems that can make fundamental, paradigm-shifting scientific breakthroughs completely on their own, without human prompting or hypothesis generation?
If, or more accurately, when those architectural shifts happen, the economic landscape experiences another massive tectonic event.
Absolutely. If embodied AI achieves scale and begins doing complex physical labor, or if autonomous AI begins discovering new realms of physics, then even the AI plus X model gets severely stressed.
So if the AI can eventually learn to do the X as well, what is the moat? What protects the human worker then?
To find that answer, we have to look back at the subtle clues hidden in the blueprints we just reviewed. We have to look at the Canadian data showing a massive surge in demand for social and emotional skills.
And the European Union's desperate focus on human rights, ethics, and transparency.
As the machine becomes increasingly capable of executing complex tasks, the only true unassailable moats against human obsolescence are the uniquely, stubbornly human traits.
You're talking about adaptability, critical thinking, and empathy.
Exactly. Let's use the house building example. If an embodied AI robot becomes capable of perfectly framing a house and installing the plumbing, human society will still require a human's judgment to decide where that house should be built.
We will need a human to sit down with the family, understand their complex emotional needs for the space, and design a home that fosters connection.
We will need humans to navigate the local zoning laws, argue with the city council, and manage the community impact of the development.
Or in the realm of science, if an autonomous AI system discovers a revolutionary new pharmaceutical drug, we will still require rigorous human ethical oversight to decide how it is tested.
And we will absolutely still need human doctors and nurses to sit at the bedside, hold the hand of a frightened patient, and empathetically explain the treatment plan.
The more capable the machine becomes at executing that how to build the house, how to synthesize the chemical, the more valuable the human becomes at figuring out the why.
Why are we building this? Who does it serve? Is it ethical? Does it improve the human condition?
So the ultimate future-proofing strategy for a student isn't about memorizing a specific coding language that might be obsolete before they even graduate.
No. It is about cultivating a highly adaptable, critically thinking mind that can ride the waves of whatever technological architecture emerges next, while remaining deeply, fundamentally rooted in human connection and ethical judgment.
That brings me to a final thought I want to leave you with today.
Okay.
If you were sitting at that kitchen table right now, staring at those brochures and that loan paperwork, it is incredibly easy to feel overwhelmed by a sense of loss. It is easy to be paralyzed by the fear of what these machines are going to take away from us.
The anxiety of obsolescence is very real, and it is entirely valid.
It is. But I want to offer a different perspective, based on everything we've decoded from these global blueprints today.
Let's hear it.
If we are entering an era where machines are becoming capable of learning and executing all the routine, repetitive, robotic tasks of human existence, both physical and cognitive, perhaps we shouldn't view this merely as a loss of jobs.
How should we view it?
Perhaps we should view it as the ultimate liberation of human potential. Think about the span of human history. For thousands of years, the vast majority of human beings have been forced by economic necessity to act like machines.
We have spent our lives doing repetitive physical labor or routine data processing just to survive, to put food on the table?
We essentially turned ourselves into biological robots. But now, for the first time, we are finally building actual machines to do the machine work.
Which means the fundamental economic incentives of human society are shifting for the first time in centuries.
Exactly. For the first time in history, the most economically valuable skills a young person can develop are not their ability to sit at a desk and act like a robot.
No.
The most valuable, irreplaceable skills they can cultivate are their most deeply human ones. Their wisdom, their empathy, their ethical judgment, their ability to solve complex, messy problems, and their capacity for creative rebellion.
That is a profound reframing of the challenge. You are not sending your child to school to train them to compete with the machine. You are educating them to transcend it.
So to the parent and the young adult sitting at the kitchen table tonight, take a breath.
Yeah.
You are not planning for a world where humans are obsolete. You are planning for a world where, finally, humans get to be fully human. Let the machines do the machine work. Your job is to figure out what the human work is going to be.
It completely changes the tone of that conversation.
It really does. We have covered an immense amount of ground today. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the global blueprints of our future.
It's been a journey.
It is a complex, rapidly shifting map, but hopefully the terrain looks a little clearer and a little less terrifying than it did an hour ago. We appreciate you bringing your curiosity to the conversation, and we'll see you on the next deep dive. Heliox is produced by Michelle Brucker and Scott Bleakley. It features reviews of emerging research and ideas from leading thinkers, curated under their creative direction with AI assistance for voice, imagery, and composition. Systemic voices and illustrative images of people are representative tools, not depictions of specific individuals. Thanks for listening today. 4 recurring narratives underlie every episode: boundary dissolution, adaptive complexity, embodied knowledge, and quantum-like uncertainty. These aren't just philosophical musings, but frameworks for understanding our modern world. We hope you continue exploring our other episodes, responding to the content, and checking out our related articles at helioxpodcast.substack.com.